Krishna is at least multinational. I remember a few years ago, before the recession hit the auto industry, people were noting the Ford Motor Company in the U.S. at that time was losing money. And so people were thinking, oh, this enterprise is not doing well. But at the same time, the Ford Motor Company was making record profits in Germany. So that's the way enterprise works these days, is trans-border. And similarly, that is the way bhakti, Krishna consciousness, occurs in the world these days. Crosses all borders. Of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states very clearly. The Sanskrit in Bhagavad Gita is very simple and straightforward. Krishna says, Amam bhavashrate yogam proktamat aham avyayam vivaswamanave prad. I spoke this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to the chief executive of the sun planet. So right in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna expands your cosmological perspective. And there you have to decide, is it possible that living entities can be on the sun planet? According to conventionally held knowledge, this Earth planet is the only one in the whole cosmos that has life. But in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, the living entity is sarvagata, present throughout every niche of the universe. So not only is Krishna for everyone on this globe, but Krishna is for all living entities, wherever you find them, within this universe and beyond. Just like an intelligent business person understands the product, the business, we want it for as many persons as possible. I was just, before coming here earlier today, I was speaking with my youngest brother, and I suppose it's a fitting topic because just a bit north of here in Torrance, California, is the American headquarters for Toyota. So my brother, he's a vice president of Toyota, and his outlook is that it's not that Toyota is just for Japan. Any business person would agree, no, it's for the whole world, as many countries as possible. Just like a material multinational enterprise has its wealth, similarly, Krishna's international enterprise has its opulences and wealth. My brother was just telling me, some of you may know that Toyota was fined by the U.S. government about $25 million for dragging their feet about dealing with some defect in the cars, and therefore they had to recall 8 million vehicles. So, my brother, he was laughing. 25 million. He had to sign the check that was sent to the government. Like sending out a magazine subscription, a check for a magazine subscription, 25 million. Of course, to the general public, oh, a $25 million fine on Toyota, on that foreign corporation. That's good. It's good for America that the foreign corporation is fined. But from the viewpoint of Toyota, a check for 25 million. It's like, as I said, writing a check for ordering a subscription to Time magazine or something. Well, similarly, the opulences of bhakti cannot be understood by the ordinary person. The wealth, the devotional wealth of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, spreading the glories of Lord Krishna to every corner of the globe. Its wealth cannot be appreciated by material analysis. Sometimes people argue, and this happens in Australia, for example, where I deal with many overseas students who are coming from Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore to study in Australia, because that's one of the top places for students from abroad to study. And sometimes they say that this is the age for materialism, therefore we should be material. We have to be the right way for the right time. This is not the spiritual age. Because it's not the spiritual age, how do you expect us to be spiritual? We have to fit in with the prevailing winds of the time. And this is a materialistic time. So therefore, we should be materialistic. And then other students, they are concerned that if we become too much in bhakti, if we become too much Krishna conscious, we'll lose our competitiveness at the workplace, and we'll lose our academic fervor, our academic determination at the university. So there are these fears that the Krishna product can be overwhelming. Of course, if we look at material life, we see that it indeed overwhelms people. But that is considered to be proper and normal. But the fear of being overwhelmed by Krishna seems to be upsetting. If we don't know who is Krishna, then we'll have some fear that Krishna is going to upset my party, he's going to upset my agenda. But once we understand Krishna more, we reduce our paranoia. The process of bhakti is about getting to know Krishna more and more. Getting to know Krishna more and more means getting to know what real opulence is, what real wealth is. The advanced bhakti texts, like Chaitanya Charitamrita explain, there are three great riches in life: Krishna, love of Krishna, and Krishna's service. If you have those things, then you are genuinely opulent. Still, we have this fear. How spiritual should I be? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that there is a balance between material and spiritual affairs. Yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata. Dharmasya glani. This is the balance between material activities and spiritual activities. When that balance is disturbed, Krishna says, he appears in this world. He appears himself. He appears via his devotee. He appears as the holy name. Krishna will always do something about this imbalance between material and spiritual affairs. But sometimes, when people talk about balancing the material and spiritual, it's all one-sided. They don't know what should be on the spiritual side. Therefore, everything goes on the material side. The program that Krishna has for every devotee in this material world is how to execute your material responsibilities in such a way that you can attain the highest goal of life. I was speaking about this at the University of Toronto Business and Management School. It is amazing how many people today are opening up. They want to understand. I was to speak on the topic of spiritual economics there. And the university, the business school heads of staff thought that, maybe 30 persons will come, 30 students, probably mostly from India. This is an India kind of topic, and we have Indian students. All right, we'll give you a seminar room, and you can hold forth. 2 days before the university, the business school, called up and said, we have 150 RSVPs of professors, government leaders, MBA students. So they switched our venue to an auditorium, swank, very luxurious auditorium where the CEOs of General Electric and IBM would speak. So they put us on the stage, and the stock market ticker was above our head. And we explained to them spiritual economics as presented in Srimad Bhagavatam. What does Srimad Bhagavatam say? The graduate study to Bhagavad Gita. What does it say? Dharmasya apavargasya. All occupational duties should not be performed simply for material gain. They should be performed to attain freedom from material existence. So that is the secret nectar of the bhakti process. How to perform your material activities in such a way that we become purified and we gain freedom from material existence. Positively spoken, we advance in our attraction for Krishna. And that is the real wealth. There's no question of our prematurely, immaturely, or in a fanatical way dropping our material responsibilities. Arjuna tried to do that in Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna told him, no, you have to do your duty as a Kshatriya, as a Vedic martial and administrative man. You have to do your duty and do it for me. Now, doing something for Krishna is not just a mental adjustment. Doing something for Krishna means that Krishna enjoys the results. Krishna enjoys the fruits. People are becoming very frustrated by working so hard just for material gain. This selfishness seems to be very attractive, but it's so unsatisfying. Anyone knows who's tried to live selfishly, how unattractive and unsatisfying it is. Although it looks in the beginning attractive, it turns out to be so unsatisfying. The bhakti process focuses on karmic activity. You have to act. So how are you going to act so that you make spiritual advancement? Yes, you have to live in this world, but how to live in this world for a maximum benefit? That is the question that the bhakti yogi is concerned with. Sometimes persons feel threatened because they're afraid of Krishna. Often people say that if you worship the demigods, if you worship the devas, it's strictly for a particular material result, and therefore you don't have to fear. But if you start to do Krishna bhakti, who knows what Krishna will do with you? Because Krishna is concerned with your spiritual advancement, the greatest wealth. Yes, sometimes people become afraid. I was talking to one of my godbrothers, Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he was describing how he came in contact with Krishna consciousness the same year I did, 1973. And he was just 16. And one of his friends found a Back to Godhead magazine and gave it to him, saying, "You're probably interested in this." And he began to read the magazine and became so absorbed in the contents. His mother noticed how he would read this magazine over and over again. And so his mother just drove him to the temple in San Francisco at the time, just deposited him there. Even though she was a university professor, her husband was a university professor, so both parents of this future devotee were university professors. They thought this is something, a phase he's going through, so We'll assist him in going through this phase, and we know it'll only last maybe a year or so. Well, that was 37 years ago. You see, when my godbrothers and myself, we took up the bhakti process in the USA. There were very few Indians in the USA at the time. I don't know if any of you were here in 1972 and 1973. Anyone? Yes. Not so many, right? If you would see someone from India on the street, you would really, because there's not so many. Now, of course, everywhere. You don't even say anything and you pass by someone on the street. But in 1972 or 73, you would say something. So, amongst Western people, they didn't know anything about India. All they thought was that India's a starving country. That's all they thought. When Srila Prabhupada spoke at MIT, late 60s, after he gave his lecture, some young students from India challenged him. They didn't even give him the respect that they know about, respect that is due to a sadhu. They challenged him, raised their hands. Swamiji, why are you coming to the USA with this antiquated folk knowledge? The world, especially India, requires technology. And why are you speaking this bhakti religion? India requires technology. Srila Prabhupada spoke to them very directly. He said, you have come here to beg. I have come here to give. You have come here to beg technology. I have come to give the greatest knowledge and wisdom. So that shut them up. At that point, they realized at least we should respect him as an elder, as our senior. I remember my parents. Of course, they didn't understand anything. What has happened to our son? May of 1972, I graduated from Yale University. Of course, the family was so happy. Oh, our son has achieved the supreme destination. And 2 months later, I was practicing Krishna consciousness. And maybe a half a year later, I joined the ashram. Oh, my father was shocked. What's happened? Maybe 15 years later, my mother confided in me that actually at that time, after I had graduated and took up Krishna consciousness, my father was thinking, he was urging her, let us commit him to the mental institution. My mother, she wouldn't sign. Both parents had to sign at the time, but she refused. So, there's a fear. Everything material is ruined if someone takes to the bhakti process. Maybe even some of you may, deep in the heart, have such a fear that we have to be careful with Krishna because he is for pure devotion. But we have to live in this world. Bills have to be paid. We have to survive. So once again, we're talking about a question of balance. How do we balance our material affairs and our spiritual affairs? The balance happens not in this way. Well, I do some material affairs and I do some spiritual affairs. And there are two separate sectors of my life. No. The way the balance happens is that all the material affairs you do have a purpose for the spiritual life of your family. That means you're going to work. You're going to work to give a bhakti lifestyle to yourself, to your family, and to as many persons in this world as possible, as your resources allow. So that is the balance. Not that, okay, there are my material activities which are totally disconnected from Krishna, and then there are my spiritual activities which are totally connected to Krishna. This is not actually how it works. The balance means that all the material affairs that we do are for maintaining the body so that we can live a healthy life for practicing bhakti. Not just a healthy life for the sake of having a healthy life. Any healthy life will sooner or later become unhealthy, as the doctor knows. But health is desired. Srimad Bhagavatam tells us health is desired, and you're allowed to desire. The bhakti yogi is allowed to desire good health for the purpose of living a life based on enlightenment, on self-realization, on advancement in Krishna consciousness. So therefore, the Krishna conscious person takes care of the body, takes care of material activities, all with the goal of increasing the spiritual realization. That's the balance. Not that there's a complete disconnect between material activities and spiritual activities. I think the fear is there sometimes. There'll be a kind of schizophrenia. 1 minute I'm acting as a devotee. The next minute I have to act as a materialist. 1 minute I am striving for spiritual goals. The next minute I am striving for material goals. My life is split. Sometimes that fear, I've heard persons express, I don't want to be schizophrenic. Maybe I just go all the way to the material side. Now, then I'll be peaceful. But if I try to do both, I'll be torn in two. So let me finally find some peace by just being completely material. But there's not a question of two isolated parts. The material and the spiritual can be harmonized when we know how to execute material activities in such a way that they contribute to our Krishna conscious development. That is the holistic way of acting in this world. Once we understand this basic principle, then we have access to the unlimited opulence and wealth of bhakti, which is beyond any material feelings of satisfaction and fulfillment. But just like a materialist can say, like from the corporate point of view, my brother was saying, oh, I had to send this check for $25 million to the federal government. There's nothing. An ordinary person says, $25 million, fine. Very impressive. The government's doing the right thing. $25 million from that foreign company. But from the viewpoint of the company, of Toyota, the $25 million, like money spent at a convenience store. So similarly, the opulence of bhakti is such that it makes all material accomplishments look so insignificant. In the same way that someone can laugh writing a check for $25 million, considering it no loss at all. Similarly, the bhakti yogi doesn't consider material opulence to be crucial. If Krishna gives it to me, fine. I'll use it in his service to help others become Krishna conscious. The real opulence that has no comparison are the spiritual opulences. understanding our spiritual identity, understanding the supreme spiritual identity, understanding the relationship between the living entity and Krishna. There's no price tag on this. All right, so some persons argue this is the material age. We should be material. Who is satisfied by being material? That is the question. We have to be honest. Materialism cannot satisfy our hearts because we're not material. This is the great contribution that India's wisdom can make for the world. This wisdom is for the whole world. It's like no matter what country you're living in, generally speaking, you can buy a Toyota. It's not just for the Japanese. How many here would say, oh, Toyota, Japanese, I won't buy the car. You want the best car. Maybe 40 years ago, someone was thinking, Toyota is just Japanese. Similarly, maybe 40 years ago. Yes, in fact, 40 years ago, someone was thinking, Krishna Bhakti is just for India. I remember in the early 70s, people were saying like that. Oh, that's an Indian thing. The people are starving there. What do they know? How can they help the world? Now everyone accepts Toyotas are for everyone. Similarly, people are now accepting that Krishna is for everyone. Let us talk more about the opulences of bhakti. Consider the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, contained in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. When it was time for Dhruva Maharaj to go back to Godhead, what happened? A Vaikuntha aircraft came to get him. And Dhruva saw the Vaikuntha aircraft from the spiritual world become manifest. Dhruva was at Bhadarakashram. At Bhadarakashram, he was performing his austerities. He had retired as king, and he was performing austerities. When the Vaikuntha aircraft landed to take him back to Godhead, back to Krishna, what did Dhruva Maharaj do? He finished his daily spiritual duties. Now just see, he's about to go to Vaikuntha, to the ultimate destination. Yet, still, he thinks, I must finish my spiritual duties before boarding the Vaikuntha aircraft. This is a serious practitioner. Seriousness is required for any successful endeavor in this world. I like to tell the story how this one devotee in Australia told me how he was working for IBM, and a top managemental guru from IBM flew over from the USA to speak to the IBM staff in Australia. So they were in a big auditorium, and the managemental guru, he was American, but born in India. So he was on the stage, and the spotlight was on him. The room was dark, and then he began to walk up and down the aisles, maybe 300 staff members of IBM in Australia, and the spotlight would follow him in the darkness. And he began to explain, what kind of person do we want at IBM? What kind of person are we looking for? And then he would, with the help of the spotlight, he began to look at all the employees and their faces. Here's the type of person we want. Tell me, when you first open your eyes in the morning, do you think of IBM? If so, we want you. If not, you can go. When you first open your eyes, do you think of your job? These are the kind of persons that will maintain. They'll be able to keep their job. Everyone else has no future. So just see how demanding the material energy is. Demanding full absorption, full surrender, full concentration. But Krishna is asking for the same thing in Bhagavad Gita. And we become afraid. Well, IBM, they give a nice salary, whereas Krishna, spiritual opulences, it sounds very nice, but does it pay the bills? Of course, what happened by depending on IBM? The managemental guru said, we will retain these kind of persons. When they open their eyes, they immediately think. As soon as they wake up in the morning, they think of their job. And what happened? What do you think happened in 2 years? They downsized and outsourced everything to India. Everyone lost their job. So, this is the nature of the material energy. How can you depend on the material energy? This is the question that the sadhus always raise. How can you depend on the material energy? Just like the recent financial disaster that happened on Wall Street. How can people depend on such persons? Now, belatedly, they understand. The conventional understanding was that someone who is working for a particular banking or financial firm will act in the best interest of the financial firm so that that financial firm survives. But what the ordinary person has a hard time understanding is these top investment brokers were simply thinking, how do I get my bonus? Never mind if my firm goes down. I just want the bonus. So the common man has a hard time understanding this. Seen under normal thinking, I should want to do good so the firm will prosper and then my salary will increase and the firm will go on and on and on. But instead, these very shrewd investment bankers, they're thinking, I don't care about the future of the investment firm. I just want the big bonus, let it come quick, and what happens after that is not my problem. Yet people were depending on them. My point is that there's something about Maya, the illusory energy of the Lord, that makes material dependency look so normal and look so attractive. Yes, we're on solid ground. That's an illusion. And people are always so disappointed when the solid ground turns out to be such a shaky foundation. Economically, politically. I was speaking at New Dwarka this morning about, because after class, during time for questions, one devotee asked the question that it seems like there are victories in material life. It seems like there are great triumphs. What about that? So I explained how every so-called material victory or triumph, sooner or later, ends in defeat. Just like if you have a health triumph, that's just prolonging the time before your health will inevitably go down. So there's a victory, but it's temporary, and the victory will turn into defeat because the body cannot sustain itself. Another example. I used to spend time in Krishna consciousness in Germany, and particularly in organizing underground activities in the former communist bloc, places like East Germany, which is now considered by historians to be the most fortified police state to ever have occurred in human history. So, then there was the unification. East and West Germany They were combined. The Berlin Wall went down. Such an emotional situation. The triumph of capitalism. The end of the Cold War. The uniting of the East Germans and West Germans. So for a while it was such a great triumph. And then what happened after a few years? When in West Germany they realized they have to shoulder all the economic problems of East Germany. The people started saying, put the wall back up. We don't want to go through this again. Put the wall back up. We don't want to take on the economic burdens caused by the downfall of the communist regime. So, a triumph. Such a great triumph. One of the greatest triumphs in Western civilizations. It turns out to be bitter. Because people, they realize we have to pay for this. They have no solid economy in that part of the country, in the eastern part, because of socialism being there for so long. Now we have to pay from the prosperous western side. Put the wall back up. Divide the country again. Who cares? Great victory turns into defeat. We can analyze all of material existence in that way. Someone who is very famous. Remember Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. President of the USA for 8 years. And what happened at the end of his life? There were days when he couldn't remember that he was ever president of the USA because he had Alzheimer's disease. He could not remember. He was president. He had attained the highest post. He had challenged what he called the evil empire, the Soviet Union. He had challenged, tear down the Berlin Wall. So he attained such fame, but then the cruel activity of material nature, he couldn't even remember in the last part of his life that he was president of the USA. And then he made what he thought was such a impactful statement in his last years. I am entering the sunset of my life, but America will dawn forever. But there's no eternal dawn in material existence. There's always up and down. Victory turns to defeat. If we are trained just to look at temporary material success, we'll not understand what to do with our life. We have to see the whole cycle and adjust accordingly. The knowledge of Krishna consciousness prevents us from being hypnotized by momentary success. The bhakti yogi is trained to see the whole picture, to see what is real wealth. Real wealth doesn't go through all these booms and busts. Real wealth is outside the reach of time and change. So that is the kind of opulence that the bhakti process gives. So Dhruva Maharaj, he attained real wealth. Although he was such a powerful ruler, still, he recognized that nothing material can compare to the value of spiritual attainment. So much so that even when the aircraft from Vaikuntha, from the spiritual world, came to take him back to Godhead, Dhruva Maharaj first finished his daily spiritual duties. This is how duty-driven he was. And then he offered his obeisances to all the great sadhus present, because he's in Bhadrak Ashram. There are other persons there practicing their spiritual life. And so he offered obeisances to them. He was not proud. I am going back to Godhead. How great am I? No, he offered his respect.